Workers at Camilla's private home unintentionally found a secret hole behind the wall of her son Tom Parker B.S.'s bedroom during a routine year-end maintenance check. Instead of pipes or odd items, there was a small, dusty secret passageway inside that led to an iron chest that had been hidden for years. Prince William swiftly received the chest and personally inspected it, discovering bundles of old documents with Princess Diana's wax seal tied to faded ribbon. From then on, hostilities broke out. A letter alleging that Diana's medication had been tampered with. Between the stepmother and the son who would take the throne, every word sparked a conflict between the past and the present. The fact that these private documents were concealed in the room of Camilla's son made it impossible for William to remain silent. An investigation was started, which made Camilla anxious and revealed long-forgotten secrets. Did it just show a chest when the wall was opened? Or did it reveal something that might shock the whole royal family? It was a bitterly cold winter. Wind crept into the royal home through all the crevices. Strict palace rules governed the required year-end maintenance at Camilla's private residence, Raymell House. Early in the morning, a knowledgeable group of workers arrived with specialized equipment and began examining the building, the plumbing and electrical systems, and every little detail. Camilla wasn't there because she was at a charity function outside. Additionally, Tom Parker B.S. had left early due to personal matters. At the end of the upstairs hallway was his roomy but seldom used bedroom. Dark wood panelings on the wall behind the headboard looked as if they had been there for centuries. It was Michael, the foreman, who noticed something strange first. He was about 50 years old and had salt and pepper hair. He used a hammer to lightly tap the wall to make sure it was solid. It was entirely different from the solid wood elsewhere. When he hit the center section, the sound returned hollow. He whispered to his two co-workers, "Something's not right." They paused, looking at each other. Every irregularity had to be reported right away in royal work. They chose to look into it more. Using a knife, Michael carefully pried the wooden panel's edge. The old glue flaked off. A dense, musty stench of decades filled the gray dust that billowed out. A narrow void was visible through a torch beam when a portion of the panel was removed. It was a narrow passageway, just big enough for one person to squeeze through. Over the years, cobwebs and dust built up on the walls. Heartbeats became faster. "This isn't an ordinary wall," the youngest employee, Liam, muttered. Michael called the manager of the palace right away. The conversation was short. After 10 minutes of arrival, the manager inspected the area cameras and gave the go-ahead for cautious exploration. First, Liam crawled in. The passage felt cramped. Both walls were touched by his shoulders. His breath was held by the dust. He halted after 10 or so steps. In front of him was a medium-sized, heavily rusted, ancient iron chest, wrapped in a dirty cloth, obviously for camouflage. They pulled the chest into the hidden passage together. The lock was sturdy despite being rusted. The manager gave it some thought and then directed that it be opened in front of security. Using bolt cutters, Michael cut the lock. It echoed with a sharp snap of metal. The lid leaped open. There were bundles of old papers bound with faded ribbon inside, but neither jewels nor contemporary documents. One private letter was placed on top, a pale cream envelope, tasteful handwriting, and easy recognition. The red wax seal features Princess Diana's royal crest, which is instantly recognizable to all Britons. The atmosphere in the room suddenly became oppressive. "A letter from Princess Diana," Liam uttered in a speechless tone. With his hand trembling a little, Michelle accepted the letter and examined the seal. And the characteristically slanted script. "Why conceal it in Mr. Tom's room?" The manager became pale. He realized the gravity at once. He commanded that the area be closed off. Royal police came to help. Diana's eldest son, Prince William, the heir apparent, received an urgent report via the red phone. In his Kensington Palace office, William was going over charity paperwork when his assistant came in with a serious look. "A strange finding at Mrs. Camilla's house, Your Highness." Inside the wall of Mr. Tom Parker B.S.'s bedroom, a letter with Princess Diana's seal was discovered. William heard. Surprise turned to shock on his face. Then his eyes regained their old pain. A correspondence from Mum, within the room's wall of her son. His voice trailed off, rage simmering underneath. He got up right away. "Get the vehicle ready. Now I'm heading there." During the drive, he sat quietly in the armored car. Snow fell lightly outside the window. Recollections of his mother came flooding back, her radiant public smile. But he could only piece together from childhood memories the years of loneliness and suffering that lay behind it. It broke his heart to see the secret in that exact location. There was a strict lockdown on the house when William arrived. Every door was guarded by royal police. Straight to Tom's room he went. In the center of the floor, the iron chest was sitting open. On a small table, Diana's letter was carefully placed. It was picked up by William. Touching the wax seal was like touching the soul of his mother. He stayed at it for a long time without opening it. "Mother, what did you hide here?" He spoke in a whisper. It was a bitterly cold winter. The wind found its way through all of the regal home. Strict palace rules governed the required year-end maintenance at Camilla's private residence, Ray Mill House. An experienced crew showed up early, with specialized equipment, examining the building's plumbing, electrical, and structural components, as well as every small detail, in the morning. Camilla wasn't there because she was at a charity function outside. Additionally, Tom Parker B.S. had left early due to personal matters. At the end of the upstairs hallway was his roomy but seldom used bedroom. Dark wood panelings on the wall behind the headboard looked as if they had been there for centuries. It was Michael, the foreman, who noticed something strange first. He was about 50 years old and had salt and pepper hair. He used a hammer to lightly tap the wall to make sure it was solid. It was entirely different from the solid wood elsewhere. When he hit the center section, the sound returned hollow. "There's something wrong," he whispered to his two co-workers. They paused, looking at each other. Every irregularity had to be reported right away in royal work. They chose to look into it more. Using a knife, Michael carefully pried the wooden panel's edge. The old glue flaked off. A dense, musty stench of decades filled the gray dust that billowed out. A narrow void was visible through a torch beam when a portion of the panel was removed. It was a narrow passageway, just big enough for one person to squeeze through. Over the years, cobwebs and dust built up on the walls. Heartbeats became faster. "This isn't just any wall," Liam, the youngest employee, muttered. Michael called the manager of the palace right away. The conversation was short. After 10 minutes of arrival, the manager inspected the area cameras and gave the go-ahead for cautious exploration. First, Liam crawled in. The passage felt cramped. Both walls were touched by his shoulders. His breath was held by the dust. He halted after 10 or so steps. In front of him was a medium-sized, heavily rusted, ancient iron chest, wrapped in a dirty cloth, obviously for camouflage. They pulled the chest into the hidden passage together. The lock was sturdy despite being rusted. The manager gave it some thought and then directed that it be opened in front of security. Using bolt cutters, Michael cut the lock. It echoed with a sharp snap of metal. Its lid flew open. Only bundles of old papers bound with faded ribbon were found inside, along with no jewels or contemporary documents. A single private letter with a pale cream envelope, exquisite handwriting, and an instantly identifiable red wax seal rested on top, bearing Princess Diana's royal crest, which is instantly recognizable to all Britons. The atmosphere in the room suddenly became oppressive. "A letter from Princess Diana," Liam uttered in a speechless tone. With his hand trembling a little, Michel accepted the letter and examined the seal and the unusually slanted writing. Why was it hidden in Mr. Tom's room? The manager became pale. He realized the gravity at once. He commanded that the area be closed off. Royal police came to help. Diana's eldest son, Prince William, the heir apparent, received an urgent report via the red phone. His assistant came in solemnly as William was in his Kensington Palace office going over charity paperwork. There was a strange discovery at Mrs. the home of Camilla. Inside the wall of Mr. Tom Parker B.S.'s bedroom, a letter with Princess Diana's seal was discovered. William heard. Surprise turned to shock on his face. Then his eyes regained their old pain. Inside her son's room, there was a letter from my mother. His voice trailed off, rage simmering underneath. He got up right away. "Get the vehicle ready. Now I'm heading there." In the armored vehicle, he sat silently during the drive. Snow fell lightly outside the window. His mind flashed back to his mother. Although she had a radiant public smile, years of loneliness and suffering from childhood recollections that he only partially comprehended. It broke his heart to see the secret in that exact location. There was a strict lockdown on the house when William arrived. Every door was guarded by royal police. Straight to Tom's room he went. The iron chest was left uncovered in the center of the floor. On a small table, Diana's letter was carefully placed. It was picked up by William. Touching the wax seal was like touching the soul of his mother. He stared at it for a long time without opening it. "Mother, what did you hide here?" He spoke in a whisper. At a private flat in Notting Hill, Tom Parker BS sat at the dining table with his phone in hand and his face completely colorless. The estate manager's words were still ringing in his head even though the call had just ended. "Within your bedroom's wall, they discovered an iron chest." Tom anticipated his mother's response. In a hurry, he called her. Urgent voice. "There's something going on, Mom. It was found." A few seconds of silence fell on the other end. A sharp intake of breath followed. An unfinished afternoon tea was still on the table in Camilla's private home's living room. The phone fell from her grasp. Her hands were shaking. She became pale and her eyes widened in sheer fear. She muttered, "It can't be," her voice cracking. Grasping her chest as if her heart were about to stop, she fell onto the couch. Her long-forgotten secret had suddenly come back to haunt her like a ghost from the past. When Camilla closed her eyes, memories came pouring in. The 1990s, when she continued to be Charles's covert lover. Their affection for one another was passionate but completely prohibited. Obstacles include the general public, the royal family, and most importantly, Diana. She recalled lonely, long nights when, "We must wait, Camilla. Diana is making everything impossible," Charles would whisper over the phone until she could no longer stand to wait. She had to do something about it. She had gone up to a young woman named Sarah, who had been employed at the palace for years and was always close to the princess, one of Diana's trusted maids. Although Sarah remained faithful to Diana, money and she gave in because of assurances of a better future. Sarah and Camilla met in a little, obscure cafe in the suburbs of London where no one would recognize them. Camilla said icily, "I must know everything about Diana. She believes that I will pay you a good wage." Sarah started to follow up. She talked about the disputes, Diana's, her anxiety attacks and deteriorating health. The princess records everything in her diary every night, sometimes with tears in her eyes. Sarah muttered one day, "There are parts about you and His Royal Highness." A diary. Camilla froze. It was the most deadly weapon of all. If it got to the press, it would bring the world to an end, but if she had it, she could steer the story. With her eyes flashing, Camilla commanded, "We have to get that diary, by any means." Sarah was hesitant. But Sarah came up with a cunning plan and staged a fictitious break-in at the palace after Camilla promised her enough money to buy a house and quit service. Diana's handbag was stolen one rainy night while she was out, but it was actually taken by an accomplice Camilla had hired. Sarah gave Camilla the diary. Camilla, who had told the maid to tamper with the medication, opened it during a secret meeting in a park and quickly skimmed the pages filled with agony. The public would eventually accept Diana and Charles after her breakdown, and their love would no longer be that of the other woman. Camilla concealed the diary in the old iron chest. In Tom's bedroom, when he was little and the room was seldom used, she had a secret passage built behind the wall. "No one will ever find it," she told herself as she locked the chest. Camilla opened her eyes, cold sweat streaming down her face, convinced that the secret had died with time, so she threw the key into the rivers. Down her back as she paced the room and peered out the window at the heavy snowfall. She had once thought that everything she did was for love, for Charles, for their future, but now she felt a wave of fear mixed with a brief twinge of regret. But now she felt a deep wound in her soul as she thought about William and Harry and what Diana had gone through. Was I wrong? She asked herself, but she quickly dismissed the idea. No, she could not afford weakness now. She began planning her response. She had to erase traces. She fumbled in a drawer for an old phone number, knowing that she would have to call Sarah, the old maid, to guarantee his silence. Dialed. After a long period of ringing, a middle-aged woman's voice answered. "Sarah, it's me," Camilla said, trying to sound composed, "and we need to meet." Camilla knew William would not stop, so she sat down right away, her head spinning. He was like, Diana was resolute and unyielding when justice was at stake. Prince William hardly slept in the days after the chest was found because the royal family was so tense that it could be sliced with a knife. He spent hours with the royal security team, a team of elite investigators who had worked on the most delicate cases in a sealed office at Kensington Palace, operated under his close supervision. All documents were sealed, and no information was disclosed. Reviewing the list of Diana's previous domestic employees was the first step. The palace kept detailed records of each employee's name, date of employment, and reason for leaving. With bloodshot eyes from sleep deprivation, William sat in front of the computer screen and flipped through page after page, and the close maid named in Diana's diary, Sarah, who had worked for Diana from 1992 to 1997, exactly when Camilla and Charles's covert relationship was at its height, became the obvious suspect. With no forwarding address, no trace in public banking systems, and a citation of personal reasons, Sarah had left service just months after Diana's death in 1997 and disappeared as if she had never been there. William said softly to the security chief, "That's just too convenient." The team broadened their search. Some recalled Sarah as quiet, but there were no immigration records, old bank accounts, or even contacts with other former palace employees. William felt cornered because no one knew where she went after leaving. One investigator speculated that she either changed her name and left the country, or someone assisted her in disappearing. With his fists clenched, he paced the room, his rage growing every day in the absence of fresh leads as he recalled the diary. Entries. Camilla's eyes and A's were Sarah, and she knew everything. If remained silent indefinitely, the issue might remain hidden. He would not accept that. Continue digging, he commanded. Look for any odd transfers in all of the financial transactions connected to Camilla from 1995 to 1997. The security team worked nonstop. They used their unique royal authority to track down old bank records, reviewing hundreds of transactions to determine which ones were the most legitimate. Nothing that was clearly related to Sarah, shopping, charitable giving, personal expenses, led William to suspect everything. When it looked like they were at a standstill, a ray of hope emerged when the team re-examined Diana's sealed medical records, which were kept after her death and included a list of the supplements and sedatives she had taken from 1994 to. In 1997, William paused while reading the report, ordering a trace of the drug batches because Mother was taking these exact medications during the time the diary describes her health declining. Diana frequently purchased her prescribed supplements from a small, antique pharmacy in Chelsea, London, which was still in operation, although the previous owner had long since retired, according to the records. 2 royal security investigators showed up at the charming old pharmacy in Chelsea the following morning, when snow was still covering the streets of London. The little store had a faded sign and was still open despite the fact that the previous owner, Mr. 2 men in black suits entered, and Harold Jenkins, now 83, knew right away that they were not regular customers. "We need to talk about Princess Diana," one of them said politely but firmly. Harold had retired years ago and only visited occasionally to clean up and chat with regular customers. With a slow nod, Mr. Harold asked, "Do you remember her?" Even so, although his memory was sharp, his eyes were clouded by age. He guided them to a peaceful nook behind the counter, where there were antique chairs and a kettle. "I had a vivid memory of her. She frequently visited here starting in 1994 to pick up supplements that her private physician had prescribed. Her appearance grew thinner and more worn out." Mr. Harold opened a drawer and took out an old ledger, the transaction record book from those years. He flipped through the pages of 1996. "This is the medication batch that she used. She once brought back a bottle, which I checked and found wasn't the one I had dispensed. That implied that it had been tampered with. Long-term use of a substitute medication may result in dependency and severe disability. She just smiled sadly when I told her to change it. It simply needs some rest, in my opinion." Her health rapidly deteriorated after that. The security team's investigation was expanded. Old invoices, lists of delivery personnel, and most importantly, who had collected the drugs Diana took in her last months. The trusted maid, Sarah, was at the end of the trail. According to the records, Sarah regularly picked up the prescriptions, and in one transaction, Camilla's intermediary account was used to receive a sizable cash payment. No longer was there any question that the medication had been purposefully switched as part of a scheme. At the same time, Camilla became more and more anxious at home. She had been in constant contact with Sarah, trying to get her to accept responsibility. Camilla's voice was shaking as she whispered, "Sarah, you must say you acted alone, over the phone. Otherwise, both of us are done." Sarah didn't say anything for a while. "You said you would protect me, but now I'm scared. William's research is extensive. I'm unable to handle the fall for this any longer." Camilla hung up, her hands shaking wildly. Gazing out at the dense snow, she paced. The clock was ticking. It was too late when she attempted to close hidden bank accounts and erase old emails. Security had previously located her after tracking down a sizable transfer from Switzerland that was masked by a shell corporation. On that particular night, Sarah was sitting by herself in her tiny flat on the outskirts, crying uncontrollably and holding her phone. Diana, the gentle mistress who had supported her family during trying times, came to mind. She recalled the evenings Diana sobbed, believing she was being hurt. Sarah muttered, "I was wrong." She called a hotline for royal security and had heard rumors about it. She shook her voice and said, "I need to speak to Prince William. I have evidence." Sarah was taken the following morning to a safe haven outside of London. William was physically present with a severe but not irate look. Warm and serene, he sat across from her. "You don't have to be scared. Tell me all about it. The truth is all I want." Sarah started crying. "I obeyed Mrs. Camilla's instructions. The woman. I was paid to take the princess's journal. Afterwards, she made me tamper with the medication and replace it with a hazardous sedative. Although I regret taking the money, I did so. Since then, emails, transfer receipts, and even a tape conversation with her from 1997 are all in my possession." Sarah passed a USB drive to William, who listened uninterrupted, comprising instructional emails, transfer receipts from Camilla's account, the evidence, and an audio recording of Camilla's characteristic voice. "Diana needs to be made weaker. Nobody can." He accepted it with a slightly shaking hand. "Thank you," he uttered hurriedly. Coming forward was the right thing to do. Sarah sobbed as she left, and William sat by himself, gazing at the USB drive. "We will keep you safe." When his rage reached a breaking point, he called his father, King Charles, right away and said, "We have irrefutable evidence, Father." After a brief period of silence, Charles said, "I will call her." "But son, are you sure?" Camilla had to confront this. "Mother has endured enough," William said. The atmosphere in Clarence House was so gloomy one afternoon in January 2026 that one could hear the ticking of the clock. King Charles, his face etched with pain and fatigue, sat behind the big wooden desk in the sealed meeting room with a thick, meticulously. Camilla was directly implicated in the sealed file, Diana's diary, Sarah's testimony, receipts for the intermediary transfer, audio recordings, and the medical report on the tampered medication batch. When Camilla was called in at 4 p.m., she went in while attempting to remain calm, but her hands were so tight on her purse that her knuckles were white. Despite her light makeup and pale gray suit, her eyes showed complete panic. William stood next to his father, his shoulders squared, his eyes cold. No one greeted her, so Charles gestured for her to. "We have conclusive evidence," Charles said in a low, tired voice. "Camilla. Diana's diary, Sarah's statement, financial transactions, and the audio." Camilla forced a feeble smile and said, "You know I love you, Charles. You can no longer deny it. Everything I did was for us. I only wanted to safeguard our future, not hurt Diana." William interrupted sharply, saying, "Protect our future by stealing my mother's diary and hiding it in your son's bedroom? By switching sedatives on her?" With tears in her eyes, Camilla turned to William. "That is not protection. That is conspiracy. Diana was unstable at the time, William, and we just sped up the process so everyone could see it clearly." "You don't get it," William repeated, his voice shaking with rage. "I never intended for things to go so far." "Go so far?" Charles raised a hand to stop him, saying, "You made my mother weak, destroyed her confidence, turned her into a target for the press, and now you claim you never intended. My mother died in an accident. I once thought our love was genuine, but now I can see that you went too far, not just against Diana but against the whole royal family," he said, looking at Camilla with disappointed eyes. With tears streaming down her face, Camilla bowed her head and muttered, I apologize for my mistake, but please don't make this public. Laura, and the dignity of the monarchy. Cover-ups cannot be the foundation of the monarchy's honor, William said, shaking his head. Mom deserves justice. Charles let out a deep sigh, having already made up his mind. From now on, Camilla, you will no longer participate in any public royal duties. You will live in private under supervision. You will no longer attend events or accompany me at official functions. Camilla looked up, her voice breaking. Maybe there will be internal disciplinary measures, or even the removal of certain titles if deemed necessary, before the matter is referred to the Royal Council for final judgment. This is not possible, Charles. We are married. I am queen. A queen is not. Charles said, his voice colder. I loved you, but I cannot forgive what you did to Diana and to my sons. Camilla stood up unsteadily. Permitted to harm others. Your mother was a good woman, my son, but all I wanted was to be happy. She gave William one last glance, but he didn't respond. You did the right thing, son, but now we must keep it quiet. Charles sat alone, head in hands, after the meeting, and called William back. He just watched her go, her figure small and frail in the long corridor. William nodded. The council will decide within a month. No press leaks. I know what you mean, but I will do everything in my power to preserve Mother's legacy. Camilla lived in solitude in an isolated house on the outskirts, rarely speaking to Charles, and only seeing Tom and Laura, who attempted to console her. We'll get through this, Mom. Camilla just shook her head. William took some time to read his mother's diary again. Mother, I have secured justice for you. No one will ever harm your legacy again. The Royal Council convened in closed session at the end of January, and he wrote a private letter to Diana, which she would never read. Following a contentious discussion, they made their decision, and Camilla was permanently disqualified from publicly representing the royal family, although she was still referred to as queen in name only. No punishment was announced in public, to stay out of trouble, but in royal circles, Camilla had obviously paid the cost of her history. While performing a standard year-end maintenance inspection at Camilla's, workers in a private home unintentionally found a gap behind the wall of her son's bedroom. Tom Parker's. There were no pipes or odd objects inside, items, but a small, secret, dust-covered passageway that leads to an iron chest that had long been kept under wraps. Prince William swiftly received the chest, personally inspected it, and discovered stacks of ancient documents bound with faded ribbon that had the wax seal of Princess Diana. From then on, hostilities broke out. A letter alleging tampering by someone, Diana's prescription. Every utterance sparked a conflict between the past and present, between the son who will inherit the throne and the stepmother. These private documents were concealed in Camilla's son's room, which left William is unable to remain quiet. A probe was initiated, which led to panic in Camilla and revealing secrets that were long believed to be lost. Did the wall's opening reveal a chest, or did it lead to a reality that could it tremble the whole royal family? Tell us what you think by leaving a comment below. Do not forget to like. For more, share and subscribe. Click the next video that appears on your display. You'll have fun.